Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and this episode 355. I am joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPatton89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing on this Wednesday morning?
It's frigid, so yeah, uh, bundled up more than I usually am.
Yes, it is chilly out there. Um, the Knicks are not chilly, at least not offensively. But before we get started, I do have to make a few announcements. The first being Strickland has an Instagram. Check that out. That is at the Strickland Instagram. Posting all kinds of new content on there. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are and you've not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That would be a huge help to us. Strickland also has merchandise that is available on our website. You can find that at www.thestrick.land. There's a link there that'll take you to the merchandise store, and you can find all kinds of cool stuff: t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. Again, you can find that on our website. Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland's podcast I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bozos, our news podcast, hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter. You also get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about the Knicks and more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Murdo, one of the best in the business. And now you get access to Strickland NFL. And you guessed it, yes, it is our newest podcast, an NFL podcast hosted by Constant Metricos and Jeffrey Rasmussen. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits like listening on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without Bet Online. All the major sports are in action this week with the college football playoffs ready to kick off. Bet Online is your number one destination for all your sports wagering info, including news for pro football, the NBA, upcoming fights, and NHL games this season. Head to the website today to get into the action and see all the updated odds for the week. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. So the Knicks snapped a 2-game losing streak, and they defeated the Toronto Raptors 136-130, which was nice. Not so nice that they gave up 130 again. And even less nice is that a reason why they gave up 130 is that Mitch Robinson was ruled out for at least 8 to 10 weeks, which is when he'll be re-examined with an ankle injury that I guess requires some type of surgery. I don't know, which I guess before we get into maybe the game, but what are your kind of broad thoughts with Mitch Robinson being out and the Knicks heading into what is almost undoubtedly the toughest month of their season?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously less than ideal. Mitch has been having, or had been having, a defensive player of the year caliber season, or at least first team all defense caliber season. I believe it's positionless this year too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so that would have been an advantage too for him. I thought it was particularly, look, 8 to 10 weeks for anyone playing that well. It sucks. Mitch has really worked hard. His teammates have praised him. You'll still see like weird comments here and there from his trainer, but I think Mitch is a really positive part of that team, and it's tough to see that happen. It's also particularly bad timing because the Knicks had a couple of their sloppiest games. Obviously in the in-season tournament, and Mitch was obviously part of that, but there was just a team-wide lack of communication. So losing still your best defender at that point doesn't help. When you're struggling with communication, losing probably your best defensive communicator and Emmanuel quickly at the same time, though obviously doesn't look to be as extended, didn't help either. But having said all that, the Knicks do have a very good backup in Isaiah Hartenstein, who has, especially over the last few games, really come on and played well. He gives you certain looks that Mitch doesn't. We'll see if he's able to do more on offense now if he's playing with Randle and Brunson a lot more. I know they started Sims, but I expect Hartenstein will get the bulk of the minutes. But I think the drop off from Mitch to Hartenstein actually concerns me less than the drop off from, Hartenstein isn't going to be the same level of monster on the offensive glass. I think he's not far off as a rim protector. He's turned into a pretty good defensive rebounder. I don't think that will be a huge drop off. I think that what I am concerned about is Sims, right? Because he hasn't shown to be a great rim protector. He's good at moving his feet in space. If you want to change the scheme to allow for that, fine. But especially the starters, Brunson can't really switch. I don't know if you can really go with if they're starting DiVincenzo. He's not really someone that you want switching onto bigger players. So it's interesting because in just the drop and just protecting the rim, that's not really his strength. Because he's a little undersized for the center position. He has long arms and he can jump. But there's very little margin for error at that point when you're 6'9". So we'll see how much he's grown. But I think that's what's more concerning. And obviously we just hope Mitch gets better, makes full recovery. It'll just be interesting to see what kind of adjustments Tibbs makes on defense, and if the other guys can pick up the slack.
It's obviously never great when anybody gets injured, but for the Knicks purposes, I think Mitch Robinson getting hurt is a pretty big deal. I am less doom and gloom about it in the sense of that the Knicks last year went 12-11 in 23 games without him. And it feels like everybody's forgetting that for some reason. It also is weird to me that anybody was surprised Jericho Sims started the game, because that's literally what the
Did you say 12-11?
Yeah, they went 12-11 last year without him.
So I do think our sights are set a little bit higher than that this year. But yeah, to your point, that wasn't disastrous. So,
I mean, yeah, but your sights are set where they are in part because of Mitch Robinson. So if you're treading water without him, I think that's fine. That's actually pretty solid. Again, I don't know why anybody was surprised that Jericho Sims started silly what happened last year. So I don't know.
Hartenstein has really improved his play since then, right? And Sims just hasn't played at all. So it's a Tibbs weird thing, but I wouldn't say I was surprised, but it was interesting.
I don't know. I thought it was I was not surprised at all. I fully expected that to happen. So it is what it is. That part is, obviously the defense is going to take a hit. I don't think there's any question about that. Quite frankly, I thought that was, whatever. I don't really want to do this, but yeah, I would just say that was a pretty bad defensive performance again from the team, a few individuals very specifically, and more disappointing or more concerning maybe in some ways, and part of the reason why the defense is likely to take a hit with that much Robinson is just how much the rebounding fell off, especially the defensive rebounding. Yes, offensive rebounding too, but when you were talking about defense, obviously defensive rebounding matters more. And without Mitch, and not just that you're without Mitch, it's that Sims is taking those minutes, and Sims, for all the things that he can do, he's not a gigantic guy. He's a physical specimen, but in terms of centers in the NBA, he's actually not quite a center size in a lot of ways. So he struggles at times to box guys out, keep them off the glass. And I think we saw that very much in action throughout that game. Granted, Toronto themselves are, they are a pretty strong defense or offensive rebounding team. So, we'll see. Like there'll be further tests ahead. Utah's a good offensive rebounding team. Phoenix is a good offensive rebounding team. So that's their next two matchups. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs in those and how the team performs in terms of defensive rebounding. What I do find interesting and what I am maybe betting on or counting on or whatever, I don't know if the offensive drop-off will actually be that much. I know, like, if you look at Mitchell Robinson's splits for the season, the team performs much better offensively with him on the floor. They have 118.2 offensive rating with him on the floor in 614 minutes, and with him off the floor, they have 114.3 offensive rating in 442 minutes. I would counter to that by saying that I think that exaggerates his offensive impact by quite a bit. He's only played 20 minutes this season without Jalen Brunson on the floor. And I think that's a massive, massive deal. And Jalen Brunson has played 188 minutes without Mitch Robinson on the floor. In those minutes, the Knicks have 123.4 offensive rating. Defensive rating, 112.9. So the defense is not totally collapsed with Mitch Robinson on the floor in those minutes. But obviously, most of these minutes prior to the game against Toronto came with Hartenstein on the floor. So, obviously a very good defensive player in his own right. But very specifically, why I'm not too concerned about the offense. And actually, I think there's a chance the offense might fucking take off. Is that they get much better shots with Mitch Robinson off the floor. And you might be surprised by that because you'd be like, well, Mitch Robinson gets 7 billion offensive rebounds and he's tipping the ball back and he's getting dunks and whatever. Well, here's some numbers for you. With Mitch Robinson on the floor, the New York Knicks are taking 19.4% of their shots at the rim. They're only shooting those at 56.3%. They're taking 14.1% of their shots from 3 to 10 feet, and they're shooting that at 43.5%. And they're taking 12.5% of their shots from short mid-range, 10 to 16 feet, at 35.7%. They also take they take 8% of their shots in these minutes from 3. Or no, sorry, that was wrong. They're taking 40% of their shots, 40.4% of their shots from 3. They're actually hitting those at 41.1%. Now, in the minutes without Mitch Robinson on the floor so far this season, that's 442 minutes. The Knicks are taking 25.6% of their shots at the rim, 0 to 3 feet. 61.6% is what they're shooting on that. From 3 to 10 feet, they're taking 16% of their shots. They're shooting 41.7%. Taking 10.8% of their shots in the short mid-range, 48.3%. And they're shooting 36.5% of their shots in 3 at something close to 36% from the field on those shots. Whatever you want to make of all that. There's a lot going on, but I do think.
I am curious what you would make of that. Do you think, because we've talked about this, right? It almost seems like a conscious strategy to operate from shorter mid-range and closer to the hoop to get Mitchell Robinson those opportunities. So do you think that's a reflection of that, and and maybe they'll just go away from that and that'll improve the shot profile, or do you think it's something different there?
No, I think that's exactly what it is. And if you actually look at the minutes with Brunson on and Mitchell Robinson off this year, that's 188 minutes. So look, it is still small sample, but I do think it says something. They're taking 27.6% of their shots in those minutes at the rim. 63.3% is what they're finishing. They're taking 15.2% of their shots from 3 to 10 feet. They're shooting 38.9% of those. They're taking 11.3% of the shots from short mid-range, 10 to 16 feet, shooting 50% of those. And they are taking about 34%.
Okay.
34% of their shots from 3. And they are shooting those at, I don't really know the number here, but probably something like 38%. The point being, I think what's more telling, more than the percentage, is the volume. They're consistently getting to the rim at a much higher
threes too.
Yeah, and taking more threes. No, they're taking less threes, actually. They're taking more threes with Mitch on the floor, which actually makes sense. But they're taking way less shots at the rim with Mitch on the floor, which also makes sense to me. And they're taking way more shots at the rim when you especially adjust for the minutes that Brunson plays without Mitch Robinson on the floor. And we've talked about this. The Knicks, if you look at the numbers from last year to this year, I think basically Julius Randle is shooting worse at the rim. RJ Barrett was shooting worse than the rim. Jalen Brunson shooting worse at the rim. Manuel quickly shooting worse at the rim. Like, I'm not putting this all on Mitchell Robinson, but I do think that there's something to be said about, like, if your strategy involves your center nominally setting a screen and then running to the front of the rim to get established offensive rebounding position, there are some trickle-down effects of that. And some of those effects result in poorer finishing, less finishing at the rim, whatever it is. But I do think it's telling that the volume and the percentages of their finish, of the team's finishing, drops this season when Mitch Robinson is in the game. And I think they'll benefit in some ways offensively. They'll also probably not benefit in some ways offensively. We know that there's a value of Mitchell Robinson being able to hoover up extra possessions. And they're obviously going to lose that, even though Jericho Sims is a pretty solid offensive rebounder. We know Isaiah Hartenstein is a solid offensive rebounder. They're not elite in the same way that Mitch is. But I do think having two centers now who are less geared towards running as fast as they can to the front of the rim, and not just that, I think they're both a lot more comfortable with the ball in their hands. I actually think Jericho Sims is pretty underrated in terms of his comfort with the ball, for a center anyway. And I'm less. I think the Knicks can tread water, or whatever you want to phrase it. But I do think it's going to come in the form of being a much more, much stronger offensive team than finding a great balance or something. The defense is going to take a hit. There's no two ways around it. And especially given the rebounding impact he has in the defensive glass, Mitchell Robinson, and some of the general effort issues we've seen, specifically in transition and other stuff, they're definitely going to take a hit there. But I do think the offense has a chance to still be really, really good without him.
Yeah, I mean, I am not as high on Jericho's ability to do much more on offense than what Mitch was giving you. Hartenstein can at least hit that little push shot. Jericho, we've seen him try to create a little bit. He experiments with that fadeaway jumper. I'm not sure he can have an impact. I think it's a really good point that you made. I do think it's when he does come back, I think it may be worth at some point for them to have a conversation. It's like, did we lean too much into the offensive rebounding thing? In early season, again, it's fine for them to have experimented with that. I'm not blaming it. And we're not even saying I don't think that is the wrong choice, right? If maybe the percentages going down is a worthy trade-off. But I think, a point I would agree is that the Knicks are not reliant necessarily on Mitchell Robinson's offensive rebound. That is a direction strategically they have gone. It is not that they have no other options, right? They can rely more on their perimeter scorers. They can, they can, I think that, like, how will they win the possession battle? They'll have to shoot better, and they'll have to continue to avoid turnovers. I would imagine not having Mitch shouldn't affect that one way or the other, because he's not really turning the ball over much. You might have an increase of one or two turnovers when Hartenstein decides he wants to try to be Brett Favre, but I think that's a pretty good point. I think I am a little bit more concerned about, like, I definitely agree Hartenstein gives you some better spacing because he moves more on the perimeter. He's a better screen setter. He has that little mid-range game. I don't necessarily think Sims can threaten like that. But we'll see. And I would be curious. The last thing I'll say is, I would be curious if we see that kind of uptick with Sims on the floor in field goal percentages and shots at the rim, or, if he ends up being similar to Mitch in that he's kind of a rim running big whose main focus is going to be offensive rebounding on the glass, on offense.
Yeah. I don't know. I obviously am not, saying, oh, we're better off without Mitch, but I do think offensively there's an interesting argument to be had. And it's also why, even as well as Mitch has played this year, and he's been awesome, and as awesome as his contract is and all this stuff, I do think, I've been hesitant to say, well, that's it, center of the future, we're locked in forever and we're set here. Do I think you can compete with Mitch Robinson as your center? probably. But I think when you're watching, like, if you watch a lot of the best teams around the league, I think there's a reason why a lot of them have centers that are a little bit more capable of, I'm not going to say shot creation, but just more capable with the ball in their hands, be that as a shot creator, even just stuff as simple as dribbling that Mitch just struggles with. And like, he's just never going to be that good at it. It's cool that he busts out a crossover every now and then and a in and out dribble, which was crazy, but like, that's just not that's it's going to be once in a blue moon stuff. He's not going to be able to consistently do that. And I think there are some drawbacks to it, but he is out, and that is the new reality the Knicks have to adjust to. They played
the last note on that. Do you see them making a move in the short term, whether it's signing a guy like Taj Gibson or trading for someone to bolster the center depth, or while he's out?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that if they do something, maybe it'll be, I would be surprised if they did something going into maybe after this month, going into January, but I struggle to see them doing anything right now. I think that would be kind of that's just not something they've done.
I think we lost you there, but I do think they have confidence in Jericho Sims for sure. So they haven't used these kind of short-term moves to to mitigate for injury or something like that. So I definitely get that. I am curious though. I mean, it feels like the stakes are a little higher this year, right? And I am curious if that changes and they are a little bit more in win now mode than they have been in previous years.
I mean, I'm sure they are. I just don't know that like there's going to be a move out there that makes sense for them to make. And like it's also just hard to make moves before the deadline. I know they have the last 2 seasons. Last year, the Josh Hart one, they kind of made it before the deadline, but it was basically like the week. It was like a couple of days leading up to the trade deadline. So it's just hard because teams, deadlines create pressure, and as I'm sure as any college student knows, oftentimes maybe you don't do anything until the deadline's staring in your face. So
Leon Rose is going to do a bunch of Adderall and at the trade deadline and get us Lowry marketing.
Yes, Adderall. That's what he's going to be doing. Snorting a bunch of Adderall, Leon Rose. But no, I don't know. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if they if they added Taj, it wouldn't totally shock me just because it's like, hey, they don't have a third center right now. Like the third center is basically Randle, who was also your only true kind of like power forward. So
my hot take is Deuce McBride would be better at center than Randle. But
I think it's not that much of a hot take as far as I'm concerned. But like, yeah, I think that I could see them just adding Taj because it's like, hey, we know him. We know that he doesn't need to play to stay ready. He'll be fine. If we need to call on him, he'll, go out there and give us like a good 15 minutes or whatever, and we can move on. So I wouldn't be too surprised if they did that, but I do think I would be surprised if they dip into the trade market anytime soon. I think they'll let this play out almost because they have to, not even necessarily because they have an option.
Well, because a guy you brought up before is Kelly Olynyk. And I think what's interesting about that is that he doesn't just help fill this Mitch situation. He can play the 4, right? And he gives you a little bit that inside outside. Do you think that's maybe they target someone who can help them now, but also in the future because of that? Because I think they wanted Sims to be kind of a hybrid, right? Or they've used Josh Hart as a hybrid wing 4 and RJ. I think Sims, they really were hopeful at one point that he can play the 4 because of his ability to put the ball on the floor. We just haven't seen that come to fruition. Do they target a guy like Olynyk or someone who eventually can take over that role even after Mitch comes back?
Yeah, I don't know, and that's what I think is interesting about it. Like Kelly Olynyk is really, I actually think he'd be a really good addition. He's got playoff experience, obviously adds a different dynamic. Um, it's a different dynamic that the Knicks, I think, quite honestly, need in some ways. Like I think they could use a center that can open up the floor and just throw that look at teams. We literally have had Jalen Brunson now for what is into his second season. And the only time we've really seen him in any kind of 5-out lineup is desperation mode at the end of games when the Knicks are down like 10 points and they just need offense. And when I say end of games, I'm talking about like the last, fucking 2 minutes or something. And they play Randle at the 5. We saw some very, very brief stints of Randle and Obi at the 4 and 5. And guess what? He looked really, really dynamic. I think the offense was great in those minutes, but like we don't have a real sample of that. And what we do know is that Jalen Brunson, his breakout year with Dallas, was with a team that played a shit ton of 5-out, and he was a key part of that. And he was, as a great ISO scorer, he was able to capitalize on all the advantages that yield. So, adding a player like Olynyk gives you an advantage there. I would worry about, if Mitch comes back, would Tibbs take a player like that out of the rotation, or would he just be like, okay, well, now you're the backup 4, and now all of a sudden you have even less minutes to distribute between guys like, Quickly and Hart, those two specifically, and Grimes for that matter, who I think need more minutes, could benefit from more minutes, whatever. And that's an issue, but that's also a coaching issue. And I don't know if the front office should be evaluating personnel moves based on what I think is personally just a coaching shortcoming of Tibbs. So like, I don't know. I think they should still be in the business of adding players that can help them win, especially in Mitch's absence. But that is a concern to have, when Mitch inevitably returns. So I don't know, but I mean, I would still be into Olynyk, but I just don't think the Jazz are going to make a trade until the deadline. Like I think they will make trades, but they won't do it until the deadline because what's the reason for them? Unless you're making such a strong offer that they're like, okay, fuck it, let's pull the trigger. Which why are you doing that for Kelly Olynyk? And why? And given this front office's track record, yeah, I don't know. He's yeah, it'd be difficult to see. So yeah, I don't know. A little bit. I'm not excited, but I am interested to see how they manage this, because last year when Mitch was out, he kind of missed 2 separate stints, neither of them this extended. This could be a 3-month absence, maybe, right? Because he's getting reevaluated in 8 to 10 weeks. And yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so the Knicks do not have Mitchell Robinson, but they do, or they did, play a basketball game against the Toronto Raptors, which again they won 136-130. I don't know. I'm curious, like, what were your takeaways from what we saw in this game?
Yeah, I mean, we're continuing to see sloppy defense. Like I said, losing their 2 best defenders didn't help. I think that it's interesting. If you look at it like almost like an A/B test, right? You had early in the season. I think the thing that really sticks out is, we've talked a lot on this pod about how much Quentin Grimes struggled and was barely even looking at the rim. It felt like. Goes to the bench, has a pretty solid effort against Boston, comes out, puts up 19, matches Scotty Barnes, by the way, almost off by a point, had a way better plus minus. So whereas Dante DiVincenzo in the starting lineup, his impact was much more muted. So I'm a little concerned about that position for sure, because we simply need more, not either of them as players, but you're seeing that maybe it wasn't Grimes. Maybe that really is just a tough position to produce from with that starting lineup. And I think that's something they'll need to address. especially especially given you probably will need more offense from there. You'll need more perimeter scoring with with the fact that you can't rely on offensive rebounds as much. But I thought, it was a tight game, obviously coming off a couple losses with an emotional loss in Mitch. And I thought they've showed good mental toughness. They clearly don't have it on defense right now. But there's something to be said about having the fight. And, we have complained a lot about Randle. I think both of us are skeptical if he can be part of a championship team, but he really dominated their front line, which hasn't always been the case in the past. So some encouraging things. Still concerned about the defense for sure.
How did he dominate? I really want to understand this. Can we be very specific on what we're talking about when we say Randle dominated?
Offensively.
Randle dominated offensively, which was very good to see.
I'm not addressing the defense just because it is what it is. We know. So.
But I don't know how we cannot address it because it's just, to me, it's
so
like
I should have said dominated offensively.
Yeah, because to me it's like I'll tell you, like, that game was so frustrating to me to watch Julius Randle play, because you're watching him dominate, to your point and to his credit, whatever you want to say about this Raptors team, and they're a fucking joke, to be honest. But like, between Siakam and Anunoby and even Pirtle, it's a pretty solid defensive front line. Anunoby, a lot of people believe, is the best defensive player maybe in the history of basketball. Just ask Masai. But no, he's a very, very good perimeter defender. Pascal's a guy who matches up quite well with Julius in terms of physical, kind of just his physical tools, his length, whatever. And Pirtle's obviously a pretty solid defensive backstop, and Randle completely destroyed all of them at various points. He Benji noted this, but they adjusted to the game he played against them. Whatever it was that 2 weeks ago? Whatever the fuck it was, and they adjusted his little pet shot, like that he likes to shoot going to the right. They were overplaying that, so they made him go to his left, and he was killing them going that way. I thought some of his playmaking was really nice again in this game. He had a really, really nice pass to Josh Hart at the very end of the game that Hart, I think, maybe was even surprised it got to him. But it was a tremendous pass against a trap that was coming onto him. And, that's stuff that Randle has struggled with in the past. So that was really encouraging to see. And again, probably one of his best offensive games of the season, maybe of his career in some ways, at least his Knicks career. And yet I'm watching that game and I'm like, you're killing it offensively. And yet I think he ended up with the only minus of the starters. And I don't
Team
think
low -1. Yeah. It was a -1, so that's not bad,
but it speaks to the point where it's like he basically was a neutral. And did he kill them? No. But did his offensive dominance somewhat belie his impact on the overall game? Yeah, I think so. And, single game plus minus isn't everything. And honestly, often it doesn't tell you the story. But I did think in this game it told the story. And I thought that for as good as his offense was, he was a joke on defense. I mean, that first half, I forget the first half. I don't like how many times can you just let guys run by you in transition and not make the guy can't get out of first gear to get back on defense. Fucking if he has a chance to get the ball on the break, though, he's sprinting full speed to do that. I'm sorry, like with Mitch Robinson out, he's the leader of the team. I'm not just looking at him to score points. Okay, like yes, obviously that's great. It gives us a much greater margin for error, and to be fair to him, that's like what he was not. He was not doing that to start the year, right? He was both mailing it on defense and playing some of the worst, most inefficient basketball of his career. Maybe, historic levels of inefficiency to start the season. So he deserves credit for turning that around. And the short mid-range stuff, like he's really, really found a nice comfort zone there. But the defense is, I legitimately think this is the worst it's been, at least on par with 2021-22. Like this is that level of defensive apathy we're seeing. And you know, it's also just stuff like it's like he turns the ball over and then he's just walking back, and it's like I don't know. I that stuff just always will drive me nuts. And just gonna put my cards on the table here. Like it's the stuff that is why I don't believe in him as a long term piece because it's like, again, you're like 28, 29 years old. I think this is who you are. Like, yeah, it's really cool that he keeps evolving offensively. One, I think it'd be nice if we knew what the fuck to expect from him year to year offensively. Like, hey, what is your game? Like, we're seeing we get these crazy shifts every year. It's like, oh, now he's taking a shit ton of threes. Oh, now he's decided to take less threes because he wants to get back to bully ball. Oh, this year he's just gonna have a temper tantrum the entire year. Like, we don't know what to expect year to year, shot distribution, all that stuff. I think it makes it challenging for the front office. I think it makes it challenging for others on the team. I think it makes it challenging for the coach. Like, I think there are things about even his growth that are challenging, but at least you can say offensively, there's no question like his skill set growth is, I mean, I don't even know what the hell it is compared to what he was coming into the league, but calling it an outlier is a disservice to what it is. It is truly one of one, how he's morphed his game. But defensively, all that effort stuff, like all that shit is why I think people are really skeptical. And I will say, if you see some of the I thought in this matchup, actually very specifically against the Raptors and the Hawks. So maybe these are just two teams he just feels really comfortable against. Maybe he likes those matchups. Maybe they don't have guys
Except in the playoffs, but yeah.
Yeah. But like his playmaking in these games and his comfort in bringing other guys into the mix, even late in games in pressure situations, has actually been good. And that is not something that you can consistently, I have not been able to consistently say about him. So that is encouraging. And that is something that if that holds up against better teams, better defenses, I think even as some, I would say among his harshest critics, I would view that as something that does change like fundamentally how maybe you feel or think about him. But the defense is just not good enough, and it's like it's not all on him. To be very clear, it is not all on him. The defensive drop off that we've seen. I thought Josh Hart I thought Josh Hart was amazing in this game, but Josh Hart had a couple of terrible defensive possessions in transition. He's also been all over the place with some of his help rotations. Brunson's defense the last 3 games has really dropped off. I think teams are maybe finding different ways to target him, and they're looking at that. There's a play where the Raptors kind of the Knicks tried to hide Brunson on OG, and they had OG cut backdoor for an easy layup. I think teams are being smarter now about how they're hunting Brunson. I don't know that the DiVincenzo swap for Grimes matters to the defense at all. I think it's actually a defensive drop off, but I also get why Tibbs felt like he had to do it. We talked about this plenty. Grimes has struggled, so I understand that. Obviously, Mitch isn't there. Like, I don't know. It's not all on him. It isn't. There's been a drop off collectively, but his drop off isn't a drop off. It's what we've seen all year. And as soon as other guys' level drops a bit, as soon as Mitch is out, you see what happens. Okay, you give up 146 to Milwaukee. You give up 133 to Boston. You give up 130 to the Raptors. You let them score 60 points in the first half, 70 in the second half. And I know some of that was weird fourth quarter garbage time stuff, but that's that's not good. And
it's also not like they shot particularly well, by the way. They shot 36% from 3. The Knicks gave up. This is a very poor shooting team.
Yeah.
It's not like it wasn't like the Milwaukee game. So the Knicks defense really gave up a lot of good looks.
Yeah. And I just think that, that stuff is on, I just, at the end of the day, I would take a little less offensively from Julius because I think he has more guys around him capable of picking up the slack on that end, especially with Mitch out. If it meant that he was going to give more defensively, because I don't know, you can get by with Julius mailing it in on defense for most of the season when Mitch is out there for long portions of the minutes like that Randle's out on the floor. With Mitch out, and especially when we know that Tibbs is going to start Jericho Sims, it's very hard. It is very, very hard. And that's why, like, I am encouraged by some of the offensive data without Mitch on the floor, but I'm also very, very concerned about where this defense is headed. And, you know, I don't need Julius Randle. You can't expect Julius Randle to be some dominant defensive player given his offensive role. But I think it's crazy. I think it's nuts to not expect more than what we're seeing. And I think it's actually ludicrous and disrespectful to Randle himself in terms of what he is and what he's capable as a player and as a talent to praise that performance against Toronto beyond what he did offensively. Because overall, to me, that was not even close to among his best performances. That is like, I thought the game he played in Toronto against the same team was way more impressive to me. I thought he was fantastic in that game. I said that was in some ways, I think it might have been the most complete performance of Randle's Knicks career in a lot of ways, just given the two-way dominance, genuine two-way dominance. And that wasn't there against Toronto. So tremendous offensive performance from Julius, great shot making, some very, very encouraging decision making late in the game against coverages that he's struggled against. But the defense is a major, major concern. And I don't feel like we need to ignore that just because he shot well from the field.
I don't think not to ignore that. But I will say this. You said, so there's a few things. One, I think one frustrating part of that is that everyone has been like, oh, Mitch can't guard stretch fives. I think a big part of that is because they don't have a good help defender at the four. Look at the teams that have won. I've written about this. Look at the teams that win championships. They don't even put neutral players at the four defensively, to be honest, right? You can look at going back to obviously Draymond, obviously guys like Chris Bosh. Last year, Aaron Gordon really filled that two-way role. Tatum plays the four, but they also they can play Horford there. They can play KP there, right? You don't win with just because it's your second biggest player and because you're putting so much on the big, you need that guy to really step up. Teams without so that's one thing. And especially against a 5-out team, they're like Mitch plays too soft. He's not going to step out and stretch fives. Yeah, because if he gets beat or if somebody else gets beat and he can't recover the rim, he cannot rely on the other guy, the other big guy. And I think that's something that's going to last. Like you can blame the centers, you can say they're slow and immobile, and I think you really need at some point you're going to need a defensive role player in that position. The second thing I'll say is you said that given Randle's offensive load, maybe it's not fair to expect a lot of him on defense. Look at the all.
I don't think you can expect him to be like a lockdown. I don't need him to be an all NBA defender. I need him to do the rotations. That's what I expect of him.
And if you look at basically every other stuff, like he's two-time all NBA player, it's not unfair to hold him to this standard. LeBron James is 39 years old. There's been a couple of pieces written about how impactful he's been. Now LeBron has a super brain. He's a freak. Fine, I'm not. But
is he a super freak?
Yeah. Guys like especially bigger players, but like guys like Tatum, like none of the wings. What wing is top notch or viewed as a star that isn't good? Booker is a good defender. Tatum's a good defender. Brown is average, but I don't think he's viewed as that kind of star. Bradley Beal is not a good defender. It's debatable whether he's viewed as that kind of star. And if maybe that's the kind of player we're talking about with Randle. But I think it's especially more damning when it's a big for the reasons I mentioned. And so, yeah, what contending team have you seen in your lifetime that has been able to roll with a subpar player at the power forward position defensively? Can you think of one? Like a real contender?
Who the fuck was starting for the Suns when they went to the finals? It was like Cam Johnson.
Wasn't it Bridges? I wouldn't have called either of them.
Bridges was in the four. It was like Torrey Craig or something like that.
No, I think it was Cam Johnson. But
yeah, I mean, I know metrics love Cam Johnson. Let me tell you, who doesn't love Cam Johnson. This guy.
Would you call him a subpar defender?
Yes, Cam Johnson before he's definitely. How do you think he did against Giannis?
Well, who does well against Giannis?
I'm not, but yeah, I know. Yeah, but I mean, maybe he would. Who knows? But I know. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I think your point is well taken. Like, generally speaking, you really can't even have a minus defender in your lineup to be a true contender at this point. If they are, they need to be like supernova level offense, or they just need to be bad in a way where it's like, okay, they're bad, but they compete. Like I think Brunson is bad, but he competes and he tries. And if the rest of your lineup is not made of minus defenders, you're probably okay with that. You could probably cover for it, especially if one of those guys is an all NBA caliber defensive backstop, right? That stuff is fine. And obviously, RJ's improvement also helps Brunson. Like that, there's value to all of that. But without Randle like joining that party, like it doesn't matter. And quite honestly, like it's just really disappointing because for him to come out after that, that Boston game and talk about how we're not tied together defensively and we all got to work on it, blah, blah, blah. He did the we thing again. Our defense hasn't been good. And for him to do what he did in that Raptors game where you're like, holy shit. Like, I genuinely believe this. I think that first half was the best scoring half I've ever seen from him because of how complete of an offensive game he was showing in terms of where he was scoring from. This wasn't just like, oh, he's hitting 5 threes or something. This was like, some real mid-range technician type stuff. But to see that and then juxtapose it to whatever the fuck he was doing on defense in the first half was kind of insane. And, this is like the third or fourth or fifth game in a row now where the team as a collective comes out of halftime. They look like they ripped 5 shots and did nothing else. Like they're not prepared at all. And Randle is central to that stuff. So that is pretty, he's just a weird player, man. And I don't know, like it's to your point though, defensively, like it's hard to compete with a 4 who can't or who doesn't try defensively. And, even more frustrating is like, and I think this is where over time I've come to just kind of like understand where Tibbs is coming from. I get why he doesn't want to play Randle at the 5 because he's probably watching the shit and he's like, this guy has no idea what he's doing or doesn't care or doesn't try. Like, I can't trust him to anchor my defense no matter what. Like, it's just not a viable situation. And because of that, we don't see any Randle at the 5 minutes. And I get that. I actually sympathize with it and I understand it. Like, I think I totally almost agree with Tibbs when it comes to this.
Yeah, no, I think that's and I don't think that's also why part of the reason it didn't work out with Obi, right? So I think Randle is going to have to at least compete on defense. It's not he doesn't like I think you said it well. He doesn't have to be an all NBA level defender, but yeah, like the other guys he gets mentioned, even a guy like Durant, right? He's having more of an impact than Randle does. And the bar doesn't need to be that high. But I think there's been, people talk about, in the 90s, the best players played both ways and all that. That isn't as much true as people want it to be. The top players are good defenders. Even Cat is this year, right? So I think that's something they need to work on. I do want to get back to kind of this Quentin Grimes thing. What do you think was different about the last 2 games? Is it just a simple matter of him coming off the bench?
Yes. I quite honestly think it's that simple. Like, he was not touching the ball. He was clearly frustrated. I think what's the thing in Star Wars where it's like fear leads to hate, hate leads to anger, anger leads to the dark side. I feel like for Quentin Grimes it was like, not touching the ball led to frustration. Frustration led to struggling with confidence. Yeah. And confidence led to playing like a total jag-off for fucking the, in all facets. I will say his offense has been much better the last 2 games. If I'm going to criticize Randle for his defense, Quentin Grimes' defense against the Raptors was atrocious. That's like probably the worst defensive performance I think I've ever seen from him. But really,
it is a tough matchup because of just the size there, right? And
but it wasn't just about the size. He was just his rotations and closeouts. It was fucking all over the place. But And I will say some of that I think is adjusting to like, oh no, I'm playing with this group now, not who I was playing with. So I think he's adjusting a little bit in what is expected of him, what his rotations are, and all that stuff like that. But offensively, I mean, this is as confident as I've seen him in God knows how long. He's just pulling up with no hesitation, playing off the bench. He had a couple movement threes, which is stuff that we have been like, maybe he doesn't shoot them because he can't make them. But at least for a couple of games now, we've gotten some evidence of like, well, maybe he wasn't shooting them because that's not in the playbook for him with the starters. And, does this move strengthen the starters and the bench? I don't know about that. I do think it's going to get the most out of Quentin Grimes. And like, this is a thing that happens a lot with young players where, look, Quentin Grimes goes into like, yes, I know that people were like, well, was his role last year. Why is he not okay with doing it now? And why is he struggling with it so much now? And I think you've got to understand, like last year he was a second-year player who got put into the starting lineup. And guess what? You're probably like, he's the 25th pick, right? So you're like, okay, well, this is great. I'm going to buy into whatever, like anything they're asking me. I'm going to do all the grunt work. I'm going to be happy taking my 7 to 8 shots from 3 a game or whatever the fuck it is. I know I'm not going to touch the ball. I know I'm not going to handle the ball much, but I'm fine with that because this is a great step in my career. Okay. Now, when you take a step in your career, what's the next thing you do? Are you just like, all right, I'm good. This is it. That's all I want. No, like in any job, in any business, you always want more, especially at early stages of your career. And for NBA players specifically, especially like, look, let's be real. He's got in 2 years, he's hoping to land it, or maybe as soon as this upcoming offseason, he's hoping to land an extension, at a lucrative one. The best way to do that in the NBA, as we know, is to get your numbers up. And I'm not saying it is selfish to some degree, but I don't think it's selfish in the way that it's worth criticizing. It's part of your, it's what you want to achieve in your career individually. And I think he went into this offseason. We know that he worked a bunch with JJ Redick. We know he talked about, he worked with Penny Hardaway, clearly in an attempt to improve his off the dribble game. So like he worked to expand his offensive game. And all of a sudden you come back and that's great. You're doing the same thing. We want you to do the same exact thing that you did last year. And I think it's hard to work all summer, put yourself in a headspace where you're like, man, I'm going to work on my game. I'm going to expand it. And when I come back, I'm going to be able to show everybody what I can do. And when you come back, it's like, well, we don't want you to show everybody what you can do. We want you to do exactly what you did last year. And that's it. I think that can be really frustrating. I think that can affect your effort. I think that can affect your execution. I think that can affect the force you play with, the confidence you play with. And I think we saw all of that in effect with Quentin Grimes. And obviously that frustration boiled over after the Milwaukee game. I had no problem with him saying what he said. I had no problem with Josh Hart saying what he said when he said it, right? A week or two before that, about being frustrated with his role in the offense. Maybe Emmanuel quickly should say it next, and magically he'll start getting more shots and minutes or something. Who knows? But like, I don't have a problem with it because I think sometimes it's healthy for guys to get what they feel off their chest, and now it's out there and it's done with. And maybe that frustration forced Tibbs' hand to move him to the bench because he knew, guess what? I can't get you those touches with the starters. It's not possible. I think it's possible, by the way. I'm saying what Tibbs thinks. It's not possible for me to do this. This is, and if I need this guy, right? Like I need this guy back in the mix. And without him, like this team takes a big hit. So I need to get him back on side however I can do it. And his choice was to move him to the bench. And I think it's been a choice that has yielded dividends and immediate dividends. And I think it's here to stay, to be honest. I don't know. Like, we'll see. The starters haven't been, tearing the world on fire, or, setting the world on fire, but they've been fine. And I think the bench group will benefit from Grimes being in there. I think Grimes will benefit from being in the bench group. I'm actually really, really excited to see more minutes with Quickly, Grimes, and Hart. And RJ for that matter. I think those groups could be really, really fun. And I think they benefit too. I think that bench group benefits collectively from having one less. Like DiVincenzo, sure, him and Grimes slot into their kind of spots and lineups. I think DiVincenzo's somebody who handles the ball more. And that group did not need more ball handling. I think it actually needed a bit less, right? Because you have Hart who likes to get on the ball, you have Quickly who likes to get on the ball, you have RJ who likes to get on the ball. Having a kind of true blue gunner out there in that group is better. And they get out and run. And I think he benefits from that too. So, yeah, I'm excited from what I saw from him offensively. And I think this was the right move. And I do think that it was as simple as he's with the bench.
Do you think we'll ever get much more production out of that starting shooting guard position?
No.
It's just no way. Because one thing Grimes and DiVincenzo will have in common is neither is a great on-ball creator, right? They don't have the confidence maybe or the ability to wave off a guy like Randle or certainly Brunson to run their own action. If you had a player in there at the 2 guard who could, do you think they would be able to actually pull some usage from at least Randle and some of those creation opportunities? Do you think a guy who just has the skill set to absorb more usage on ball would just take it? And the reason why I haven't seen from Grimes or DiVincenzo is that's just not how they play.
What do you mean? You think that they are the reason why the shooting guard isn't producing in that starting lineup?
I'm saying that perhaps we've been thinking about it where we just think it should be a 3-and-D guy who can play off of the heavy usage guys. Maybe if you want production out of that spot, you want another guy who can do things with the ball in their hands. So if there was a player on the roster who could space, but also could actually be empowered, a guy who has started to wave Randle off a lot more, and he played that starting shooting guard position. Hypothetically, if this player had happened to exist on the roster and they could do things on ball and off ball, do you think that player would have success at the starting shooting guard position?
No. Not with this coach. Not with this coach, not with Randle here. I don't. I really don't. And I think you can just visibly see this different styles of play. Like when Randle's on the floor, a lot of the offense is centered around getting the most out of Julius, catering to Julius, maximizing his game, maximizing his output. I'm not necessarily saying that that's a bad choice by Tibbs. That's a choice that's yielded a lot of success, a lot of wins. The Knicks are a much better team than they've been in the past doing this. So I can't definitively say it's a bad choice. I do think there are really big drawbacks to it, especially with how slow and methodical they play when they do this. And I do think it's worth noting how different they play when Randle is off the floor. I do think that he is very unique in how he impacts the entire team style of play. And I don't think any other player on this team has that effect. I know Jalen Brunson's a heavy ISO player. I don't think he plays.
But he plays a lot faster. When I mentioned that Cleveland game last year where he dropped 48 on Mitchell, he wants to take the ball out of the hoop, even on made baskets. I've seen him want to run a lot, and that's just not how they play. And maybe that's somewhat on Randle, but I don't think Brunson at all has an aversion to playing fast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know. I don't know if pace, if the pace is different with him. I don't know. It just feels like they play faster. It feels like they get into sets faster. It feels like, forgetting how the pace, I also think it feels like the ball moves cleaner, and more guys get involved. I think Brunson's more willing to defer, or not defer, but let other guys do their thing, kind of. When he's on the floor without Randle, whereas I think when Randle's on the floor without Brunson, he's like, okay, it's time for me to get my, get my goose on. No, as Maurice Claret once said. No, just like it's time for him to get his game off, right? And that's how he views it. And I think that comes across in when you watch them. That's what it looks like, right? It looks like, okay, this guy is not interested in maybe sharing the load. No, he's like he thinks it's his time, and I think that comes across. But no, to go back to the original point of like the shooting guard thing, like I think whoever's that shooting guard in that lineup is just gonna have to deal with that. As long as this is the status quo. And maybe it needs to be the coach, maybe it needs to be the players, whatever. But like, if you want that to change, then it needs to be more than just taking out one guy and putting another guy. I don't think that's how it works. I don't think that's how it will work.
I think you need a bit of philosophical change, but I also think the player you put in there needs to have the skill set to do that, right? So, what if I told you there was a shooting guard on the Knicks who, when he plays with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, in 187 minutes this year, they have a net rating of 10.88, 122.79 offensive rating, 111.91 defensive rating. When he plays with Jalen Brunson without Julius Randle, there's an additional 77 minutes, also over 10 net rating, but it's actually a little bit lower than with Julius. So I think you can guess who the player I'm talking about is. Do you think, and from what you've seen, do you think, especially as his game has grown, has asserted himself more in that lineup? And if so, I mean, I think that's a pretty strong case for him to start, right? Especially when you look at how well the three of them have played together overall.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't disagree. But you're talking about in the starting lineup, right? So if you
I'm talking about those three together. So there's going to be numbers against bench units. So this would be IQ, Brunson, Randle. I assume that Quickly's not playing the three, so a lot of these minutes are going to have either Hart or RJ at the three.
Yeah, I mean, sure, but I think it's worth just kind of like noting that RJ is in the starting lineup, and I don't see a world where Quickly comes in and all of a sudden he's taking usage from those guys enough to have the usage that he has in lineups where Hart is the three, I guess, alongside those guys. And even like this is not a massive sample. Let's take it for what it's worth. He spent 164 minutes going back to the start of last season with Randle, Brunson, and RJ on the floor with him. In those minutes, he has a 13.6 usage.
Which is
now
Quentin Grimes starting lineup.
Yeah, that's Quentin Grimes. Now, in those minutes, the Knicks have a 128.7 offensive rating and a, wait for it, 111.3 defensive rating. Again, it's 164 minutes. Do I think they're going to have, the all-time greatest net rating in the history of the league? Maybe, probably not. But I do think that's a lineup that should and probably is very, very good. The problem is, like, is that actually a role that, like, we've seen now? Okay, we saw Quentin Grimes get frustrated about this role. Like, we saw Evan Fournier struggle last year in this role, right? I mean, and some of that's just Evan Fournier sucks. But we saw Cam Reddish, quite honestly, right? He got frustrated in this role. And like, say what you want about those guys, but if dudes are constantly coming into this kind of the setup that we have, and they're ultimately getting frustrated by what their role is, it says something. Like, and I don't think that you can tell Emmanuel Quickly, first of all, you already cut his fucking minutes down to 24 this year, which is a joke. Second, you're going to be like, well, you're going to get more minutes maybe, but you're going to get way less touches, way less shots up in a contract year. I think that's bananas. I don't think you can sell that. And I think that's just crazy to ask of him. And I think if you look, I'm sure there'll be people that'll be like, well, he's, if he's a good teammate, you care. Yeah, dude, he's been a good teammate for 4 years. This is payday time. And it's not like the Knicks are going out of their way to do him a solid so far this year as far as ensuring he...
Well, I mean, you can bring him back with the bench and still get him those bench minutes, but if you start him, it's easier to get him to 30, 32 minutes a night, and his usage with the bench is still going to be there, right? So,
sure. Like, I just don't know how he's not going to get touches in that starting lineup, and that ultimately is going to matter. And I don't know. I've always been against it, especially with this coach, because I don't think that the ball's not going to be popping around and everybody's going to get a feel, and it's just not going to work like that.
So I mean, the reason why I think that without making a trade, right, getting quickly from you posted, I think in the Strickland, some of the on-offs, right, it's a very stark difference. Grimes and DiVincenzo are about -7, -8, not because their minutes are terrible, but they're just about neutral. And Quickly and Hart are like +8, right? So the on-off is pretty significant difference. Hart's already getting 28 minutes. I think the biggest lever you can pull is get one of the most impactful guys, get him 8 more minutes a game. And if that comes in a starting lineup where he is taking a backseat, that's fine, but it makes the team better. I think as long as he's still getting those same minutes with the bench on top of that, right? He's just getting an extra 8 minutes a game, maybe. I still think he can get his numbers. And now he can say, I'm getting those numbers as the starting shooting guard who also runs bench units. That is a different role. And that allows you to market yourself a little bit different, because no longer are teams wondering, should we be paying, 25 million or 30 million for an unproven starter? No, that wouldn't be a question for the Knicks anymore either, right? That's what everyone says. Well, we can't pay $25 million if a guy is just a sixth man. One, I think Quickly is so unique that might even just be true, because it might be. I think even if he plays 24 minutes a game, it's a fair argument that he is worth it, just because of how impactful he is. But I do think that, I think that's the best lever you can pull, and I think eventually they're going to have to start Quickly. They're going to have to play him starters minutes. Like, that's just there's no other real path to internal improvement besides that.
Yeah, I mean, he should get more minutes, but they can do that off the bench too. Like, it's really not hard. He fucking did it with Grimes last game, which is really, really fucking annoying, by the way. He put Grimes in at the same time as Josh Hart. And I was like, are you fucking serious? Like, this is literally all you've needed to do this entire year quickly. And that would solve so much.
I think if you map out the way Tibbs subs, though, it's easier to get Quickly to 30, 32 minutes if you start him. And then you just make him the first sub, right? And you bring him back with the bench, which you do anyway, right? So
yeah, I mean, I get that. I'm just, I don't know. I don't see it happening, and I'm not holding my breath about it, because he clearly, for whatever reason, refuses to start him. I mean, he's had a chance to start him how many times over the last 3 years, especially. I mean, really since his rookie year. Fuck that. I mean,
no, he started him when Brunson was hurt. That's
it. That's the only time he started. He started the last 2 games of 2022 or whatever the fuck it was.
Had a triple-double and 42 points.
He does not. He will not start him. This is like, he started Deuce McBride over him when Deuce was a rookie who barely ever played, because he just wanted to keep Quickly off the bench because he likes him in that role. Like, this is what he does. This is what he does. Hartenstein has never started. Do you know this? Hartenstein has never started for the Knicks.
That's why they don't call him Startenstein. Crickets.
Okay. Not your finest hour. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't see that happening.
I think that I sure, maybe, but I think I get that people are tired of having the discussion. I think that's a very kill two birds with one stone type of idea. Start him, get him to 32 minutes, let him run the bench. You probably make your contract negotiations a little bit easier over the summer. And Tibbs might not want to do that, but we have seen the front office nudge him at times, and I wouldn't be shocked if that's already happening, particularly quickly. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think look, if you want my honest opinion, I'll say this: like, the concerns about fucking size. How can Quickly and Brunson, and maybe they, how can Tibbs start them together? Like, it's just tough. Like, you can't start Dante DiVincenzo at the 2 next to Brunson and then talk to me about concerns about size. Get the fuck out of here. Like, He's 6'3 3/4, I think, with a 6'4 3/4 wingspan. Quickly's 6'2 1/2, I believe, in shoes, with a 6'8 6'9 wingspan. Like, I'm sorry, these are not totally different players. They're just not. And maybe you'll take a hit on the glass. DiVincenzo's a good rebounder. He's better at rebounding than Quickly. But like, I on aggregate, there's no way you're going to convince me that unit wouldn't be better than it is with DiVincenzo. And now the excuse of, well, how can you start two small guards in the backcourt together? That shit is done, dude. That shit's been done.
Well, it never really held much merit to begin with. Last year, so going back to last year, Brunson and Quickly have played 1,200 minutes. They have a 111.72 defensive rating. It has been consistent this year. It's like 112.3. So they've been consistently good. We know they're bonkers on offense. That is 120.9 offensive rating. So the two of them together, that is your best backcourt. Let's not have any, like, Grimes is playing better. Great. DiVincenzo is a good player. Those are your two best guards. I do think that playing them without Randle maybe is going to lead to more usage for Quickly, but like, that lineup needs to close basically every game. Unless Quickly is just really off or just having a bad defensive game. I don't think there's any that we shouldn't have to mince words there. And the fact is, like, Quickly covers a lot for Brunson's defensive issues, frankly, because Quickly is their best team defender. So,
yeah, I mean, you're not going to get an argument out of me. So, look, I agree. I would love if Quickly started, but I don't expect it, because why the fuck would I? The coach doesn't seem to be interested in starting him, probably because he doesn't want to fuck up his rotations and staggering and all that stuff.
No, you never fuck up the rotation, bro.
It's true. Tibbs never does. But yeah, I think that, we can sit here and talk about it. I just don't expect it. And especially, like, look, we'll see. Maybe if the defense keeps being terrible and they lose a couple more games in a row or something, like, maybe he will. But as things stand, like, I don't expect this to change. And I do think, like, yeah, look, if you're Quickly, I don't know. If I'm him, at the bare minimum, forget my role. Like, I need to be at 20 minutes a night. Like, how am I getting less minutes when I'm, again, leading the team in, like, on-court impact? I think he's second and on-off now, like, behind Josh Hart. Like, and this is the thing. All the guys that Tibbs prioritizes, literally all of them, Randle, Brunson, Hart, RJ, like, all of these guys play better with Quickly on the floor. They are like RJ, like, Hart and Quickly basically are the two guys who take lineups up a notch. I'm not saying that's just because of them, but the way they play with guys like Brunson and Randle, for whatever reason, takes those groups up to a higher level. And if your priority is winning fucking ball games, then show me. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't really. He keeps talking about net rating. I'm like, you can't fucking talk about net rating and then play a guy who's basically been your best net rating play. He's not basically. He has been your best net rating player for 4 years.
Each of the 4 years too, right? It's not like it's been a high variance.
I think his rookie year was like Rose, but like Rose is weird because he didn't really even play that much, to be honest. But like, yeah, Rose, but like, he's been basically in your top 2 or 3 every single year. He was clearly your best guy last year. The year before also, like, it's ludicrous. Like, I don't get it. And I'll never get it, because I'm like, man, for all the good things that I think Tibbs has done, and some of the stuff that I think he's grown as a coach, or grown at as a coach, this stuff with Quickly is just so mind-boggling to me. It does not make any sense. And look, do the Knicks have they have restricted free agency rights and they don't have to trade him, and I get all that, but look, I just think that, like, you're playing a pretty dangerous game here. Like, to just constantly expect this guy to be cool with, like, whatever you give him, and sacrifice for the team, and sacrifice his role, and sacrifice his minutes, and we didn't reach an extension agreement, and blah blah blah. Like, I think you're playing a dangerous game. That maybe
if the Spurs give him $35 million, right? You might want to say, well, should we pay that for a backup guard? Well, is he just a backup guard? This is your chance to find out, right? If you rob yourself not only of improving your team in the short term, but getting that data point, I think it's going to be tough.
I mean, look, they have the data point. The guy's been starting. He started how many games last year? 21 or something. His minutes in those games were fucking awesome. Like his minutes without Brunson, I think he was putting up like 22, 5 and 5 or something in those games without Brunson. Like I'm super high.
His usage when he's played, his usage has gone up. He's actually scoring more points than last year, right? So, or just about the same in 4 less minutes. So he's, if anything, even shown more aggression, right?
Yeah.
And efficiency. He's 57 true shooting again, with a lot of pull-ups. I guess the question is, do you what do you think they're gonna like? Let's say the Spurs or someone offers him $30 million. I don't think that's unreasonable at this point, unless he really drops off in his play. Do you think the Knicks let him walk? Or do you think they match and try to trade him? Like, what do you think happens there?
I think they'll just match. I think they'll just match and try to figure it out later.
They wouldn't let there is zero chance in your mind that they would let him go for nothing, right?
Yeah, that would be that they can't. Like that would be the worst case scenario for them. I don't see how they would even justify that to anybody, let alone themselves. It makes no sense. They can't afford to do that.
And do you also see that they probably? I mean, do you think there's a possibility that if they think a agreement isn't going to reach, or it's going to be more expensive than they get ahead of it and trade him now, or trade him before the deadline?
No, I don't. I'd be surprised if they trade him for the deadline. I just don't see what they could possibly get. Like, I just don't see who's going to be available.
You make the team worse.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I don't really understand it. Now, maybe
they've never made a move that makes them worse in the season, right? So
yeah, the only way I could see it is if the season goes completely off the rails with Mitch out, and they're like, "Well, we fucking suck anyway this year." If ultimately we believe we're going to trade quickly, and some team comes in with like a really good pick offer or something, maybe you do it. But even then, I don't know. First of all, I don't see this team going off the rails, so that would be tough to believe. And yeah, like again, and as we know, like we've seen these guys now. This is their 4th year, right? Leon's 4th year in charge. We've never seen them make a move in season to try and make the team worse. Maybe they unintentionally did when they acquired Cam Reddish, but like, no, I'm joking. Obviously, they didn't even play enough to blame him for anything like that. But like, they've never done it, right? Training for Derrick Rose. I think even training for Reddish was an idea of like, okay, this is a chance to buy low on somebody who can maybe fill a role for us. Obviously, the Josh
they're losing Knox and a pick, right? So they were not.
Yeah. And that pick, by the way, that pick is probably never going to be a 1st-round pick for what it's worth. And then you traded a bunch of crap plus a 1st-round pick for Josh Hart, right? So it's like all these moves have been made in the service of either acquiring talent to improve your roster down the line or acquiring guys to help you win right now. So never have they made a move that was just like, well, let's sell off a piece here. Like I just don't. I'd be very, very surprised. Now, is there a scenario where player, let's say Cleveland's like, hey, you know what? We're done with Donovan Mitchell. Get this guy out of here. Is there a scenario where they might use quickly in a trade to get him? Sure. Fine. But like, I don't anticipate that being a thing. Like I really have a tough time imagining being Kobe Altman and going to ownership hat in hand, a year and a half after you traded the mother load for Donovan Mitchell, including Lauri Markkanen, by the way, and being like, hey, so it's not working. Can we trade Donovan Mitchell? Like, that's how you want to know what happens? You get fired. That's something that'll get you fired. So like, I don't see that happening. Maybe in the summer, but not right now. And the thing is, like, I want to. So I think this trading quickly in the summer is not easy. Like, if generally restricted free agents and sign and trade don't fetch good offers, and they're also complicated to do because of the math. And then if he signs an offer sheet and they match, they can't trade him for a year. So like, I just kind of think that this will play out. Like I could see him getting traded in season if nothing about his role changes, and he goes to management and is like, "This is a joke. You're costing me money, and you don't value me the way I should be valued, which you proved by not extending me, and now you're proving by fucking around with my minutes after I was and should have been the sixth man of the year last year." You don't
think it's time for Knicks fans to accept that Brogdon was just better than quickly off the bench last year?
Yeah, no, I don't. Shout out Michael Pina, dumbest fucking loser in the world. But yeah, that's the scenario where I could see him at leaving. But even in that scenario, I do suspect if that conversation happened, and I'm sure it wouldn't just all of a sudden it wouldn't come out of the blue one day where he's like, "Hey, I'm pissed." I think you would have those conversations throughout the season with him. And I think if it got to that point, or if it got to a point where they're worried about it, I do think that, maybe there'd be a conversation with Tibbs, and it's like, "Hey, look, we're talking about 4 extra minutes a game for a guy who, look at the numbers, bro. You're dominating his minutes. Just get him out there for 4 or 5 extra minutes a game, and I don't care where you take it from." But yeah, that's the only scenario where I really see him being moved. Other than that, I think he's too valuable right now. And yeah.
You also said, I think on a previous pod, that you think the Mitchell situation, unless they probably improve, certainly from where they are right now, is kind of inevitable, right? He has a year left in his contract. Unless Mobley makes a jump or they make a serious run, they will look.
Which is still possible.
What?
Which is still possible.
Still possible. Is that how you see this playing out? And if so, I think you said that you'd be on board with the Knicks trading for Mitchell. Do you think that's the most likely outcome here?
I do think he's gone. I don't think he's planning on staying in Cleveland past his contract. Does that mean it'll 100% be the Knicks? I don't know. I do have a strong feeling it would be one of the New York teams. That's what I think. But yeah, I mean, I think especially trading for him when he was available from Utah made no sense to me, given what we know or what we knew at the time. We didn't know enough about Quickly. We didn't know enough about Obi, who maybe we didn't know enough about these guys. And then you're talking about trading all your future draft capital, especially the stuff that's far out, 25, 27, 29. That's really tough. And I was not on board with that. I think also the cost was more prohibitive because of the years that he had left on his contract. If you're talking about trading for him in the offseason when he's got 1 year left on his deal, yeah, you're still going to have to give up something of value. But I think the price point is totally different. And that makes it more appealing to me.
Also, you're saying yesterday's price is not today's price.
Correct. And also I think having seen Brunson now play with another small guard or whatever, you can see that offensively anyway, that I think him and Donovan would be really dynamic together.
Mitchell's been defending better for its worth this year, I think.
I think he benefits a lot from kind of their, they have Allen and they have Mobley back there. That helps a lot. I don't know how good he is on defense. I do think that
he's a lot more aggressive. So you see that in uptakes and steal rates. The physical tools have always been there, right? Is he still going to get cooked by Brunson on switches? Probably, but
I think the bigger issue isn't Brunson to me. Let's just put it that way. If you trade for Donovan Mitchell, the player I'm not concerned about sinking our defense or what the reason is for our defense not being good is not Jalen Brunson, and I will leave it at that.
I think at that point, though, if you follow that, Randle has to go at that point, right? If you trade for Mitchell. Because you would now have another high usage guy. So what you really need is to surround them with great defenders. That's what Cleveland has done or tried. If the Knicks want to recreate that, Randle has to go.
And you'd have three minus defenders in that lineup with Brunson, Mitchell, and Randle. It's just not feasible. A guy in that starting lineup that we didn't talk about, but I think deserves to be talked about a little bit, is RJ Barrett. I actually liked how he played against Boston. Thought he had a good game. Thought he picked his spots well. I thought he had good shot selection. And I thought he played really, really well, especially on the stretch against – he played really well in the fourth quarter against Toronto. His finishing he started off the game, I think 4 of 13, and then he finished 11 of 21. So, this is kind of like the opposite of what you usually get from RJ, where he starts off super hot, and then at the end of the game, you're like, wait, how did you go 9 of 20 for 21 points? Where did this come from? And this was the opposite, right? He finished, I think, 11 of 21 from the field for 27 points. Again, finishing was really good. And it was impressive, I think, because this is a team with the kind of length that can impact him at times, given that
This is a team that has historically also been able to climb on his shoulders and not get called for a foul because he still made the dunk anyway. So
this is a team that's historically able to just the other part too, that fourth quarter, he got fucking elbowed in the face by Scotty Barnes and didn't get a call. And then he had to get like elbowed on top of the head again by Malachi Flynn to get a call on like basically the next possession. And I don't know. I just could not believe they didn't call that a flagrant because they call everything a fucking flagrant now. But yeah, I thought he played really well down the stretch, and I just wanted to shout him out. And I know we did mention him, but I thought Hart was awesome. I think Hart's playing really well. Yeah. I like how aggressive he's been shooting from three. He even took a pull-up three in this game in the first half. I think he's playing with good force. The defense has slipped a little bit. I think there's a little bit of just guys trying to do too much right now. Him and DiVincenzo, very specifically, those two seem to be all over the place, like just trying to do too much.
To compensate for one guy not trying to do much at all?
No, I mean, I don't even say that, but yes, it is a good joke. But like, I just think they're trying to do too much. But like, I thought Hart was awesome in this game, and I think he's been pretty solid for a while now. And quite honestly, even at the start of the year when he was not, his numbers were struggling, the team was still playing better with him on the floor. Like he's just one of these guys, and with how for whatever reason with how he fits on this team, he has an impact, and he makes us go in a very different way than others can make us go. And yeah, I just thought against the Raptors he was awesome, and he's been awesome against them in both games. And I think Omar's brought this up in our Discord, but like, do you compare the way we've struggled
hometown team, right? Oh, I thought you were going to go. I think he's historically done well against the Raptors because it is his hometown team, right? So
RJ?
Like he gets it. Yeah.
You mean RJ?
Oh, you're talking about Hart, sorry.
Yeah, but I was just going to say, like, Josh Hart, Omar's talking about this, but like, Omar in our Discord, but like, we didn't have Hart in any of the matchups against Toronto last year. We lost in all very frustrating ways. We went 1-3 against them. I do think he very much helps us in matchups like these, where they have these kind of big wings. And I know Hart himself is undersized, but he plays with a physicality that can match up with those guys, which RJ, like, let's be real, RJ and Randle, especially when it comes to grabbing contested rebounds, are not good. And I think Josh Hart's awesome at that. And even DiVincenzo is pretty good at that. And like, I think having those guys has made a material difference in this very specific matchup against Toronto.
Yeah, and Toronto is a team where you do need a gang effort, right? Because you do have all of these big 6'10" guys. Yeah, I mean, I think there's, like I said, Hart, like people love to joke, he averages 8 points a game, we're giving him $20 million, whatever. Hart does, like, he is another net rating guy.
I think he had 7 assists in this game too, though. He was everywhere in this game.
And I think it says something that, he himself complained a little bit about his role. And I look, this is not to rip on Grimes, but Hart finds a way to make an impact even when he's not having plays run for him. That is still something I'd like Grimes to do more of. He's getting more shots up with the second unit, but and that's, again, veteran savvy. I'm not, it's typical. It's no young player is gonna have the savvy of Josh Hart. But yeah, I mean, had 16, 8, and 7, perfect shooting from three. He's gonna have some limitations, but the Knicks essentially have only they have 3 players or 4 players over 6'9", and that's working out for them in large part because Josh Hart is an excellent rebounder, and he's able to do everything that's asked of him. And I think I have generally felt like RJ's process has improved the last couple of games. I think it's been better all season. You'd still like some of the decision making can go up and down, the shooting can go up and down. But we still see, when it's clicking and he's feeling, he's making the right decisions, he is a load to keep from the rim. He has improved his finishing. He's added that little floater. It'll be interesting to see.
Would you say you're tired of getting a taste and you want the full load?
I want the full look. Yeah. Jesus. But yeah. So the Knicks now will go on a 4-game road trip. So they got Utah, the LA teams, and Phoenix, I believe, right?
Correct.
So Utah feels like a must-win. The Lakers are obviously playing really well. Just won the in-season tournament. Clippers have started to gel a little bit more with Harden, and then the Suns, even without Durant, beat the Knicks. So that's not a gimme at all, especially on the road. Do you think Utah? I mean, I haven't watched too much Utah. Do they go a lot of 5-out with Lowry? I think Kessler might be hurt too. So I'm
Yeah,
curious,
Kessler's
especially
supposed to be
given
out.
how vulnerable
Clarkson.
the Knicks have been.
Yeah, Clarkson's out for this game also. I don't know. I don't really watch too much Utah, but I think they play quite a bit of 5-out, right? Because they have Olynyk there also. And I think they play they play Fontecchio in the front court a bunch. They play Collins in the front court. Like they have guys that can nominally stretch the floor. So yeah, I mean they definitely spread you out. But look, this is a game the Knicks should win. They should win this game. They should this especially, look, you're down, they're down Clarkson, they're down Walker Kessler. Like you should win this game, even if Markkanen comes back.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a chance Markkanen doesn't come back because maybe they'll be like, well, fuck it, like we're probably gonna get rocked anyway. But whatever they should win this game. I think Quickly will be back. He was he was basically a game time decision for the last game. So I'm assuming that he was very close. I would be surprised if he doesn't play today. Maybe they're cautious because they're like, well, we don't need you for Utah, so rest up and get ready for Phoenix on Friday. But like, yeah, I think that this is a game they should win. But yes, to your point, yes, Utah does spread you out, and you do have to be aware for that.
What do you mean by that? So the the it is interesting. I think this is kind of a I don't want to say a trap game, but there is some sleeper potential here. These are the kinds of teams. They have some young, quick guards. I know you've never been the biggest Colin Sexton fan, but he's a quick, dynamic, athletic guard who can get to the rim. Keontae George is one of Prez's favorites, still a young guy, but again, quick, athletic. Clarkson has given the Knicks trouble in the past. He's not playing, so they're going to see Utah a little banged up, but they have youth, athleticism. 5-out is indeed kind of a difficult situation for the Knicks. Maybe this is the way to get better, where if you never see 5-out teams and then you go straight to 400 level, guarding Dame and Giannis and pick and roll, right? That this might be a good way to kind of practice or see them how they can adjust to that kind of personnel. Obviously, without that level of star power. So I am very curious. Are there changes, especially with Mitch out? Do you see them be more aggressive with Sims? Hedging some of those things. Do you see them, maybe switch Randle's responsibilities or try to hide him somewhere else if they can't rely on his rotations? Do they, if they're playing DiVincenzo, do they, how do they deal with maybe if he has a size matchup or something? Can he handle a guy like Sexton, who's not the greatest player, but again, pretty quick? I think it'll be an interesting game to answer his questions, but even though they should win, there's some sneaky interestingness, and I could see Utah, especially if they get hot from three, causing a little bit of a discomfort for Knicks fans.
I have no idea what to expect from Tibbs. Maybe he'll have Sims hedge more, blitz, and switch, whatever. But like in general, even going back to last season, he's just kept the defensive kind of adjustments to a minimum and kept running drop.
Well, he did mix it up against Milwaukee, right? They trapped Milwaukee early on, and then again they just were finding Giannis, and again that's not all on the rotations of the Knicks. Those are two really good players in that specific situation,
and they were just on fire. Like you can't really do anything against that. But no, I don't. I think that a lot of the reason why he was comfortable doing that against Milwaukee is probably because he trusts Mitch. I don't think he trusts Jericho Sims the same way. I don't think he trusts Hartenstein the same way. So I would be surprised if you see too many out of the box adjustments. Maybe late in the game if it's close and they've been killing us in pick and roll, maybe then he'll switch it up. He's had Sims switch out onto the perimeter in past matchups that we've seen late in games. So maybe that's something that he does. But I don't I think for the majority of the game, you're going to get what you get, and that's what it is. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah, go ahead.
Will be interesting to see if they at least execute better than they did against those teams, or get a little sharper there with some practice.
Well, let's hope so, because the schedule does not let off here. After Utah, you got Phoenix, and then you got the LA teams. Pretty sure the Knicks have the Clippers Saturday night, so they have a back-to-back, Phoenix and then Clippers, and then they play the Lakers on Monday, I believe. So look, this is a road trip. Obviously, this is their first West Coast trip of the season. So they've got to lock in here. And if you told me they come out of this trip with a 2-2 split, I'm happy. I think you take that and you move on. But 1-3 is on the table if they're not careful. 0-4 is on the table if they're not careful. So you got to bank these wins, especially. And look, with Mitch out, you can't treat these games like gimmies, especially now.
There's no margin for error. Yeah.
Yeah. So. And look, the East is good. The East is it's competitive. Like every game is going to matter. And I will say this: I do think in the East, the top 8 has separated itself. There's a clear top 8, and I can't believe this. Credit to Brooklyn; they're actually in that mix. Like they've been really surprising this year. But like that top 8 is solid, and then there's a gap, and then there's like the Raptors and the fucking
Bulls.
Hawks. No, the Hawks. And I guess the Bulls are sneaking their way up now without Zach LaVine, who we definitely need to trade for. He's so good. All right. I think that's a good place to end this, unless there's anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here.
Nope, that's cool.
Awesome. All right, Stacy, let people know where they can find you and plug anything you'd like to plug.
Stacy Patton 89. I'll continue to plug all the great work at the Strickland. Keep checking out Strictly NFL and Takes from Obvious Bozos. I will particularly shout out Strictly NFL because even I've learned a lot from Con and Jeff, about football and all of that. So it's a lot of great content coming out of the Strickland. Continue to check it all out.
I will echo all those sentiments. Matthew Miranda wrote a great recap on the Raptors game yesterday, so definitely recommend checking that out if you have not done so already. Aside from that, I'm going to plug personally. I just wanted to note this randomly. Brunson had a really weird turnover game against the Raptors. He had 7 turnovers, and none of them were like, oh, he's struggling with size. They were just stupid. So hopefully he gets that cleaned up. He has been a little bit more turnover prone this year, so that's something to look up. But all right, aside from that, I have nothing to plug. So again, just plug all the work at Strickland, and I'll plug our sponsor, Bet Online. All right, that is our show for today. I hope everybody has a great rest of the week, and I will see you on Monday after the Bills defeat the Cowboys.